Inventing Place, Creative Tourism for Intangible Heritages. And we have 4 presenters today from different countries, and I'm quite looking forward to all of them. Darko Babiš will start from the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences at the University of Zagreb, Croatia. Patricia Silva, you'll see her in a moment, from the Center for Social Studies at the University of Coimbra. And Olaf Owen, that's all I can pronounce. And her team from the Icelandic Tourism Cluster, Hólar University and partners, including Visit Lofoten, Visit Greenland, Visit Faroe Islands, Visit Skyen, and, oh dear, Snæfellsnes Regional Park. You can pronounce them the way they're supposed to be. So it's a huge project with lots of partners. And our 4th presenter is Larissa Almeida, who I just saw come in somewhere, from Recria, Red Nacional de Experiências e Turismo Criativo de Brazil, Recife, Brazil. So I'm going to time you with this for about 15 minutes to allow for half an hour-ish of discussion afterward. And I'll get out of here so I can be down there and see your PowerPoint. And
somebody need to switch just.
Up there will make everything live.
Okay, thanks a lot. So I would like to thank the organizer of a fantastic conference. I'm very happy that I was among accepted to be part heritage management course the present say about heritage and connected heritage management. Screen, how many you can recognize? 1. But this is 5 out of trying to which works best. I don't would do alone and so on. Do is critically important. Going back to that 2 case studies, which I wanted to share with you, I'm speaking about, this is of course map of Croatia, I'm speaking about Croatia-Dalmatia hinterland. So this is that south part, but don't look at that seaside and Thousand Islands, which could be another topic, but I'm speaking about the hinterland, which is, from my perspective, and we could say it's in a way regarding situation there in the past, especially even in the present, kind of the island too. The first case study is discussing about the border region. This is the historical map, the border region in between the Austrian Empire, the Venetian Republic, and Ottoman Empire. So it was, as we are saying here, triplex continuum. So the borderline in between 2 strong empires at that time, where we do have the location, the castle of settled or established in a city of Islam Greek. Just to give you that idea of interconnection of different culture, there is 2 small cities, villages actually, to be honest. One is Islam Latin, so in that name of the village you can recognize, of course, Islam on one side and Latin mean Christianity on another. And then there is another village called Islam Greek, where is the castle. Again, Islam and the Greek meaning Orthodox in that sense. So that castle in the past was in the past, and I'm speaking about recent past in 20th century, all the way till the late 1980s, was kind of the culture hub for people around there. What happened in 1991, so it looked like this. It was not officially a museum, but some rooms were decorated in a sense, in historic way, including kitchen, including the dining room, and so on. It was completely privately owned, but still acted as a kind of cultural hub for local people around. So what happened in the meantime, in 1991 to 1995, we had independence war, and unfortunately the castle was exactly the border region. So during that 4 years, at the end in 1995, the castle ended like this. So what was our approach and what was our idea? I'm saying here top-down approach. I'm not skipping that to say, because some of the people, when we start to do the project, and it was initiated by several people from University of Zagreb, so from my university, some people recognize that this is exactly top-down approach, that academics, people from academia are going there to do something. Our approach, to be honest, was not in that way. At least the great majority of us didn't have that kind of approach. What we wanted to do there is to find a way how to help people after the war. So the basic, you can easily imagine the basic thing was no electricity, no water supply, landmines around, and so on and so on. But after that, when that kind of things were sorted out, the goal was to assist people there, and again to make the castle in a way, again, cultural hub for them. So this is the image of the castle, 2016 or 2017, with a courtyard. So what we done there is we start to do different kind of activities, including that basic activities to clear up the situation, the courtyard, to start different kind of the workshops, programs, voluntary work, cinemas, and different kind of cultural event. And the main challenge was, of course, not only to do that in a space like this, but to have, again, recognition of both sides, so Croatian on one side and Serbs on another side, which were in conflict, mostly involved in the conflict, to have kind of sympathy to us that we are actually not on one or another side, which happened quite often at the beginning, that they thought we are on one or another side, but that we are creating, again, space or place and space, which is the cultural hub and kind of the space for them if they have any kind of the demand, the need, question, and so on and so on. Doing exactly what the castle was actually before the war. After quite a lot of time, to be honest, it was almost 10 years or even more if we look when the sum of professors from University of Zagreb started with the project. We have a success. For us, the great success was that we had the people from both sides. But some images here do show or witness that we had the ex-Croatian president visiting the castle. So this is not like top Croatian monument, but some even politicians recognize that what we are doing there is important. And as you discussed in the morning, sometimes that recognition from the politics is important. I will say it's not critically important, but it's important in the sense of recognition and support, and then that recognition and support give you more wind and more space to different kind of action and so on. And later on, of course, the castle, again, established with some funds coming from different sides, was arranged in a sense close to that how the castle looked like before the war. So what was idea of that, which I'm saying here on this slide, is that we actually look at the potential of heritage, but foremost look at that as a potential to offer something to community. No matter is, as I said, recognized as a top-down approach from some people. So again, I'm not, running out of that indeed we from Zagreb, from academia, went there and initiate some things there. What was important from our side is that what we call the wisdom is that multidisciplinary theme which we created and which was indeed critically important to have success on that project. And some idea of some development there was establishing of eco-museum, which was later on not established officially as an eco-museum. If you are familiar with eco-museums, I don't have enough time to go into that detail now. So the concept started in 1970s, which indeed do recognize many of things we are discussing today, like participatory approach, intangible heritage, sustainable development, and so on and so on. So from my point of view, we, as a heritage experts, I'm seeing myself as a heritage expert, foremost must act as a mediators in process of bringing source, and source here is any kind, different kind of the heritage, recognized as a heritage, foremost not by us professional, but by local community, and the users, foremost, again, local community, but as well as tourists coming to that space. So bringing that two closer together. Another example is, again, from the same region, and we are speaking about Heritage Museum, the city of Benkovac, which was completely bottom-up approach, where I act as a kind of the museum consultant. Again, if you see that city of Benkovac, so just in the middle of that map, the exact location is not so important now. That was, again, castle, which was part of occupied territory, so complete collection, not disappeared, luckily, because the curators on the opposite side actually done some intervention and saved great majority of the collection. Some of the collection was destroyed. The museum before and after the war was really in bad shape, including the improvised permanent exhibition. And then together with a colleague, with director, there is only 2 people working in that museum, so quite small, no matter on important position, but quite small museum. So we actually recommended, and the colleagues started to cooperate quite strongly with the local community to check what local community is looking for, how museum can serve to them, what would be important for them. And out of all that ended up in creating of new permanent, the goal of creating the new permanent exhibition, but not only new permanent exhibition because of permanent exhibition, but because of extending the permanent exhibition to space to promote local producers of wine and different kind of the products. So creating kind of small scale of the fair for them, a regular fair, including the space where they can come and promote their different kind of the products, events, and so on. So cooperating indeed in a sense of what local community recognize as important for themselves. So after quite a long, but shorter than the first case study, quite a long term, in June, at the end of the June of this year, finally the new permanent exhibition was opened, and in the last now 5 months, no matter the high season even there in that part of Croatia, no matter we cannot discuss about the high season in that part of Croatia, was during the summertime, but quite a success, not only because of more visitors coming as a tourist, but because of reaction of the local people on the new permanent exhibition. And new permanent exhibition, of course, was created again together in between the people, the curator, the local community, and with some assistance of the outsource of the consultant. So just a few images of the new permanent exhibition, covering entire part of the region. And coming to the last part, which I try to put in these 15 minutes, as I said, the idea of heritage literacy as a part of the human rights. Of course, we can discuss about, when we are discussing about literacy, we could say this is, ability how to read and write, but in sense of, which is critically important, no question about, but in sense of thinking about importance or what heritage could do for us, that things which we recognize as a heritage, I think that every local community is supposed to have the kind of the legal and indeed human right to recognize what is their own heritage, and then to use their own heritage in a way which is the best fit their own development. And this is not happening always. And finally, as a kind of conclusion, and short conclusion, looking at the title, creative tourism, I try to cover that, speaking for the most about two, one museum and one castle near 2 museums. But from my point of view, which is not always recognized as such, any kind of museological or interpretation planning, it is creative work if done properly. Regenerative development, I think that the 2 case studies, foremost maybe the first, but the second one too, demonstrate that. And destination resilience, again, I think both case studies demonstrated that. So what is my point? What was my idea of presentation is just to share with you 2 case studies. I was directly involved and was part of that, just to offer you some kind of idea that sometimes even from the worst situation, you can get the best outcome. So thanks a lot for listening to me, and that's it. Thanks a lot.
Bear with me a second. I'm here, so we'll just set it on presentation mode. Yeah, there it is. Well, hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be part of this conference. Very big pleasure because I'm actually combining tourism, leisure, and knowledge, and in an area that interests me. So it's a great possibility to be able to do this. It's also great that I'm taking part in an event that's related to work we're doing at SES, Center for Social Studies. I'm a colleague of Nancy's at the Center for Social Studies at the University of Coimbra. And this presentation is part of sort of a contribution that I intend to make, and this is a kickstart in a way to our to work I plan to carry out collaborative work in the context of our Creatur Observatory that was mentioned this morning, and its first thoughts. And I'll just do you hear me better now? Is it better this way? Okay, good. Its first thoughts on possibilities of how, in a way, valuing literary heritage and immaterial literary heritage can contribute to creative tourism activities that boost local development. So it's just, as I said, initial thoughts. Like my colleague, I'll focus on 2 case studies of projects, research projects I've identified that have that potential and that intrigued me. And my intention is to share them with you and posit some suggestions and hear from you as well. So without further ado, to contextualize a bit, literary tourism is in a growth path, as is cultural tourism. I just thought I'd bring some numbers and some references. In the latest World Tourism Organization report in the report from 2018, I'll come to the latest in a moment, but in this report on tourism and cultural synergies from 2018, there was empirical support for the original estimates that the size of the cultural tourism market accounts about 40% of global tourism. This had been estimated by Water in 1993, and it was by this report from 2018, it was confirmed, and there was a claim that it's cultural tourism is estimated to account for over 39% of all international tourism arrivals. Within that, literary tourism is obviously a smaller field and a smaller sort of, it produces less growth, but it's growing. As I think it's obvious because the tourism interests are becoming more differentiated, and therefore there's more scope for for engagement with other types of tourism. Hence that report also showed that literary museums, writers' houses and foundations, and literary festivals, and those are quite important, are on a rise, as is the number of visitors who are interested in literature. So this was published in that study. And in 2022, there's just been another report on literary tourism, on the literary tourism market outlook. I just brought one of the charts here for our reference, but it's estimated, at the moment it's estimated to contribute to 1% of the market value, so market contributions of world tourism, but it's estimated that until 2032, so in 10 years' time, it will rise to 3%. And the conclusions of the report are that this is an exponential growth for literary tourism. What I wanted to do is bring 2 case studies from a Portuguese context, one more with a national scope and one with a regional scope. And I'll start by highlighting the one with the regional scope, which featured in this report from 2022, and it appeared. Before I get to that, sorry, just bear with me. One of the findings in this study, and I'll run through this slide briefly, and apologies if it seems a bit dense, but I'll just highlight a few things for time saving. But it came, one thing that was established is that individuals are preferring festival tourism to explore literary tourism popular sites. One good example, successful example in the Portuguese case is, as you may have heard, the Folio Literary Festival in Óbidos, which has carried that city to UNESCO to be nominated as a UNESCO Creative City of Literature since 2015, when the festival began. And it's now just had its 7th edition this October. It takes place annually in October, and that, in a way, is illustrative of cultural tourism's and literary tourism's power or ability to reduce seasonability, because it's out of the peak season, already sort of towards fall, autumn. And then also Óbidos being a coastal town, 80 kilometers away from Lisbon, it's obviously not a central hub. So it also illustrates the ability of cultural or literary tourism to increase territorial dispersal. And I have a quote there, and I'll just highlight that it has a lot to do with promoting local cultural tourism in partnership with regional organizations, which is how this festival started. It was the local municipality plus the Central Region Tourism Board, but now has sponsors such as Delta and Millennium Portuguese Bank. So it has now found its private sponsors as well. It's very much spurred, as in this quote from the Skift magazine, which has been mentioned earlier, in its survey from, again, 2018, it's spurred by the demand for more authentic travel experiences. And this was mentioned this morning by Rosa and other people, and it's very much in the agenda. And by some of the pilots, it was discussed what the authenticity as a concept and but it is a driving principle of sustainable tourism, as well as of creative tourism, where the goal is to have authentic experiences based on the culture of a place and its people. And I'm quoting from our conference program. And I have some thoughts there on some key notions about creative tourism, but we're mostly familiar with it. So it comes from this growing interest in immersive and creative experiences, which is another thing that the report from 2020 confirmed, which is helping to boost culture-based creative tourism, and this sense of personalized, of differentiated, designed to hone and to potentiate the visitor's creativity, as well as to engage with the local community and to be sort of valuable for both. Propitious. This is particularly propitious, in my view, for literary tourism because literary tourism relies precisely on aesthetic appreciation and creative expression. So that is the hub, the basis of the literary experience, whether we produce or we read. So literary tourism very much falls within the goals of creative tourism, and does have the potential to have great fulfillment that is both rewarding and sustainable. In that report from 2022 about literary tourism worldwide, Portugal is highlighted in the country-wise insights precisely on the topic of how is government boosting the development of literary tourism. And it mentions an initiative taken to develop the literary tourism of Portugal. That triggered my interest, and I found out that there was a project we actually haven't heard much about yet in SES and locally, but I think we will hear about it a lot, which is this project based in Coimbra called Lettered, Literature, Territory, Tourism and Education. It's been running since 2020. It's only now, they've only recently started publishing some of their findings, but it's estimated to run until 2025, and it's being sort of sponsored also by the UNESCO chair. So for culture, with University of Coimbra being a heritage, a UNESCO heritage site. And it's an interesting case study because it's a partnership it's being carried out as a partnership of academic institutions, namely the Polytechnic of Coimbra, University of the Algarve, and Nova, University of Lisbon, and by an association recently created, the RUAS, which stands for Recreate University Alta and Sofia. And it has to do with the World Heritage status that Coimbra University has and in improving its heritage value. And within that association, it's a partnership also of the University of Coimbra, the municipality, and the regional office of the State Secretary of Culture. So there's also this governmental sponsorship. That's why it was highlighted as a case study, and an associated called Coimbra Viva, a public company created for urban rehabilitation. So it will be interesting to see how it develops. What are its proposed tasks and outputs? It intends to create a digital data bank of literary places of the city and the University of Coimbra to collect data about key authors and works ranging in Portuguese literature from 15th to 20th century, and using cultural mapping methods to create that digital database based on houses of authors, monuments and statues, but even things as coffee shops they frequented, a lot of this having to do with people writers who studied at the University of Coimbra. It will be a publicly accessible digital platform with the possibility for local residents to add their own content. And another interesting thing is that it will have consultation throughout its stages with local regional entities, educational agents, and professionals in the tourism industry. As I say, they're just starting to publish some of their initial findings, but the aims are obvious. I'll just run briefly. Build on the rich literary history of Coimbra to promote cultural tourism. So its coordinators are in tourism studies departments. They're based in tourism studies departments, so it has a tourism goal underlying, but also to demonstrate the potential for literary tourism to contribute to sustainable economic development, and especially given the import of cultural tourism in this region, given it's a World Heritage Site, to diversify the offer for cultural tourists that already visit the University of Coimbra, and to relieve tourism pressures that are starting to be felt in the historic areas, encouraging visitors to spread wider. Its rationale, after doing some preliminary assessment, was that it's quite underexplored. Literary tourism in Coimbra, from the initial studies, they've only identified 12 writers' routes, which, considering the number of writers who have studied there, is incredibly small. And it's mostly, they're mostly sponsored, except one, they're sponsored by the municipality and the Central Region Tourist Board. And this has led the coordinators to conclude, and I quoted there, that literary tourism this corroborates rather the finding from the coordinators after researching literary tourism in Portugal in a wider context, that it's mostly limited both in quantity and diversity. It's limited in Portugal, literary tourism, and almost entirely the responsibility of official entities, namely municipalities. And this very project is an example of that. So public entities. Brief appraisal, and before I just talk a bit about the other project that has been going on for longer, and I'd like to explore too. Okay, so this has the potential really to enhance not just the local cultural and the literary heritage, but also to support sustainable development, namely the refurbishment and restoration of certain areas like writers' houses and museums. The other example, and I'll mainly do show and tell for this one, because this one has already some outputs and results verifiable. It was the forerunner for this project in my mind, which is the Atlas of Literary Landscape of mainland Portugal, called Leadscape.pt, has a website, it's been running since 2010, changing coordinators halfway and gaining more momentum and gaining more association with research centers at Nova University of Lisbon. Its intention was to, like the other one, create a digital database, but in this case of literary representations of mainland Portugal. So it's focused on landscape and places, but the actual texts. So it's a digital map of texts, of excerpts, of literary excerpts, focused on 19th and 20th century poetic and fictional works. And it's interdisciplinary because it combines literary interpretation and methods with geographic information systems used for cultural mapping of space and landscapes. We end up with maps, and I'll show you in a moment examples, and to produce outputs like a literary cartography or geography, and these are terms also coined by the authors, and its aims are to link literature and territory, and it does aim to contribute to the recognition and value of cultural heritage, as mentioned, and also to create a community of researchers and readers. And this is where I see it has potential for exploring. So its output was a digital platform, the Leadscape, which is already, as you can see, there's already a map. It's got a website. From that website, coordinators have already recreated educational-driven literary itineraries. For example, they've already created a walk through the 25th of April Revolution that a person can follow. So with those dots are indicating important places where related to the revolution, the Portuguese Revolution of '74. And more interestingly, I think, recently, and just to sort of wrap up, recently there was a web app created in association with a Lisbon literary-based festival called Festival 5L, and it was just this edition of 2021, which created an interactive atlas of the venues of the event, of the program, but also it had preset routes that you could listen to and to excerpts of literary works related to those spaces of the city. So to conclude, to my mind, these research outputs, websites, apps from projects such as this have the power to boost the creative tourism initiatives such as combining literary tours with writing workshops where there can be a creative output in a more creative engagement with the literary tour experience, and therefore of responding to this growing interest in immersive, interactive, and creative experiences, and helping to boost culture-based creative tourism and local regeneration. So as I said, restoration and connecting with the local community, and also I think a surplus with this, the pleasure you get in terms of the experience of being creative, that is important in terms of symbolic economy. And I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for your attention and for the time. Thank you.
saying something in Portuguese.
What does it say? It said it can't read the file. Let's try again.
Maybe I'll get the...
Okay. É problema técnico. Diz que não consegue, que o fecheiro foi danificado. É este aqui, é este. Eu tentei abrir e diz que ele foi danificado. Eu já tentei reparar, mas não...
Let's try.
Açores?
Oh, sorry, it's touch.
Oh, it's touch. And then this one or this one?
This.
Yeah, let's try the PowerPoint first.
Okay.
So
It's PDF. PDF.
yeah, we can use that.
Yeah. Let me try the PowerPoint. So we use the PDF. No.
Okay. Fine.
Glad we have the PDF. Okay, so let me put in a presentation.
Okay.
So let's just have us here
What?
to the right.
Yeah.
Left.
Okay. So, here I am. Thank you very much for having me. This is actually one of the places that I've wanted to visit for a long time, as your neighboring country on the mid-Atlantic ridge in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The weather is somewhat different here. I seem to be the only one who doesn't see the need for a jacket today, for example. So anyway, I'm very happy to be here, and I hope that this is the start of a more strengthened connection between these two islands in the middle of the Atlantic. So my name is Ólöf Ýr Atladóttir, the name that Nancy couldn't pronounce. I'm the project leader for NORREC, Nordic Regenerative Tourism, which is a project funded by the Nordic Council of Ministers and led by the Icelandic Tourism Cluster through me. So just a little bit about my background. I have been working in tourism for quite a lot of years, but I started out as a scientist, which I think has helped me through the years. I'm a lapsed academic in biology, and I have done guiding, I have done the managing of educational recreational centers, and then I was the Director General of the Icelandic Tourism Board from 2008 to 2007, which saw one economic collapse, 4 volcanic eruptions, and the double-digit growth at the back of that for some years. So that was a very interesting time. After which I moved to Saudi Arabia and lived there for 3 years, which is no less interesting. I served as the division head for research, innovation, and academic affairs for 1 year last year when I was coming back, but mainly now I work as a consultant for destination development management and marketing and run my own startup company in the northernmost town of Iceland, because that's where I sort of want to be if I'm not in the deserts of the Middle East. So Nordic cooperation, I think that's the baseline for what I'm going to talk about, and I just wanted to sort of home into that Nordic cooperation covers 70 years. This is one of the longest standing international cooperations in the world, and it has been really tremendously beneficial, not least for an island state like Iceland. It has open borders, so I can basically, tomorrow, I could decide to move to Oslo, and in about 3 weeks, I would just be in the system. It wouldn't be I had to take my daughter to a hospital in Drammen once when she had a ski accident, and we just spent, 12 hours, 1 MRI, and a lot of knekkebrød and then we just went home, so that was fine. So that's how the Nordic cooperation works. It is educational, and especially for Iceland, that's been very, very important because we seek our further education across borders a lot. It's work, as I said, I can move tomorrow if I want to. There's social security, you go into the system. And in the later years, it's not least been in cultural cooperation, environmental cooperation, because the Nordic countries are sort of seen as sort of forward-thinking in those respects, for better or worse. It's in energy and innovation, and now, in the past few years, in tourism, which sort of latches on to that. And it's, as I say, it's one of my favorite things in the world. I grew up in Sweden, partly, and my husband says I'm a pseudo-Swede, so there you go. The Nordic Council has an ambitious vision for 2030, where they want to become the most sustainable and integrated region in the world. And I actually like the word integration more than sustainability, because sustainability has a lot of caveats when it comes to actions. But integration, I think, is also the catchphrase for tourism, because that's how we lead things forward. It's through integrating our thoughts and minds and what we want to do and talking together, which often happens through tourism. The priorities are a green Nordic region, a competitive Nordic region, and a socially sustainable Nordic region. And our project has latched onto that. And I said, I was maybe being a bit critical about sustainability before, but the thing is, I think that we as humans, we tend to want to just stand where we were young. I mean, this is how it was, and that was perfect, so why should we change that? Not regardless of all the changes that happen around us, all the societal changes, all the history. I mean, we had Draco here from Croatia, and oh my God, the changes that have taken place there. We have upheavals, we have natural disasters, we have wars, and then we have the thought processes of new generations, and they are very important because they bring with them new ways of thinking. And I think Diane referred to that this morning. So experience shapes the sustainability discourse, and without wanting to drag regenerative tourism away from that totally, we have to understand that when we were coining sustainability, it was mainly as a reaction to what we were seeing happening. It was also in the era of the 70s, 80s, and 90s where we had a lot of thought about common values and common thinking. Now, having lived in Iceland in 2008, I, on my own skin, experienced the walk path towards more individuality, which resulted in, of course, a disaster, obviously. So, and that's when we saw the focus on responsible tourism, but that was good also because sustainable tourism wasn't actually sustainable, because if everybody's responsible for something, then nobody actually takes responsibility. So the good thing was that you had responsible tourism, but that was also very individualistic, wasn't it? So I just had to do my thing, and I had to be really happy about myself, and then I could sort of walk around and be responsible. But it didn't take into the fact that tourism is actually a collective thing. It's a holistic thing. It has impact on everything that we do. It's the one industry where, I mean, we are a fisheries nation, and nobody experiences a cod walking around the city center asking for directions. You just go and fish the cod, and then you make money out of it. In Iceland, we suddenly, for example, experienced tourists all over the place. There were lines in the restaurants, which would obviously not have been there except for the tourists. So you had all these interactions, and you have this effect on the economy. You have an effect on the educational system, because suddenly you need to educate people into the industry. You have an effect on the healthcare system, because suddenly everybody's falling down and breaking their legs in places that they don't know how are. You have an impact on the transportation system, which obviously wasn't built for 50,000 extra people in a 300,000 strong nation. So you have all these effects. So it ends up being very, very holistic, very, very public also. So there, in that, comes regenerative tourism, not least into this discourse where we're trying to figure out, okay, tourism, which was supposed to be so organic, and everybody was happy, and you just got guests, and it was so wonderful. And then there are all these planning things, and the government suddenly has to come into and do stuff, and they're like, what? This was supposed not to be a big, heavy industry with a lot of investment. This was supposed to be something that just happens, and it doesn't. So there we have regenerative tourism looking into the holistic values and into the community values, because it's not enough either to throw economic numbers at a community and say, this is really great because we're getting a lot of GDP for that, and there's a lot of money and it's really wonderful, and everybody goes, but I don't like it. I feel my home is being destroyed. I feel they're not respecting my nature, my environment around me. So they don't, at the end of the day, they don't actually maybe care, but they'd like to, because they do realize the economic benefits, but we need to have a wider thinking. We need to think, so notwithstanding economics, how do we have a community that is happy, that invites its visitors, and that does stuff with them? That's basically maybe sort of very simplistic. So, moving on, I have ruined something in Portuguese? Where are we going? There we go. Let's see. Yeah, fine. That's just so that's not an important slide. That was just me doing stuff, being clever, so we'll just move on. So Norrec 2020 is actually aimed at, and that was actually on the slide that doesn't show, it's aimed at, while Diane correctly pointed out this morning that regenerative tourism needs to address policymakers and communities at both the national and regional level, we in Norrec, we decided to look at it from the other way. Look at the fact that we have in Iceland and in the Nordic countries, and probably in Azores also, very, very small companies. And these small companies, they really, really want to participate, but they are not going to find any relevance in the national agenda for carbon output or whatever. They want to do something meaningful for them. They want to feel that they're doing something meaningful, and they want to have a discourse that is on their own, where their knowledge and their experience is also evaluated. And that's why something like a triple helix approach is so important. So you have the regional DMOs or the clusters, and we decided we didn't really care what they were. Just if they're working on a regional level and they want to be with us, let's do it. We had the small companies, and they were the main beneficiaries. So we're building tools that we sort of give to or co-create with the regional DMOs and the SMEs, and then leave with the DMOs so they can work further on them. We have small and micro-sized. You see the teeny tiny eye there? It's micro-sized because according to the OECD, an SME can have up to 250 employees. And my God, that is a very big company in Iceland. That's huge. So we're going to the micro, and then we wanted academia to contribute also, because their knowledge and their perspective, and also their structured way of doing things to seek answers is also very important, and something that maybe the others aren't used to. So everybody brings something to the table, but it also means that when you're creating stuff, you need to take everybody's experience into account. Nobody can come to the table and say, here I am, and I'm going to tell you how this works. It just doesn't work like that. So within the project, this is a first-year pilot project. We set up 4 main deliverables, because you have to have deliverables if you're going to get funding, Diane. That's just the way it is. So we set up defining the concept. We wanted to talk about how you measure or evaluate progress, because as I referred to, the old economics don't necessarily, they don't really align with this new way of thinking. However, I think it's just a part of the human psyche that you need to be able to sort of say where you are, you need to be able to define where you want to go, and you want to be able to measure your progress on the way. Otherwise, you just feel that you're floundering in the air. So that's something that we need to think about maybe from a new way of speaking. We defined some operations and products just to try out, and I'll go into all this. And then at the end of the stage, we need to evaluate, and then we need to sort of charm everybody so they give us more money, which is obviously what you want to do. So, defining Nordic regenerative tourism, I think that is a very undervalued thing, because I have very often come into projects where everybody's really happy about the project. A recent example in Iceland was the Mid-Highland National Park. And that was sort of set forth, let's establish a national park in 67% of Iceland. And everybody said, that's a great idea. So the environmental organization said, that's a great idea. The truck drivers said, that's a great idea. The energy companies said, that's wonderful. And then when we started discussing what is a national park, then it all fell through, because everybody had their own ideas about that. So we spent 2 months discussing these things. to try and get past the concept ambiguity, because that is so important, because if you don't have a consensus on the concept, you can't define goals. We needed to see how we can have tourism products facilitate participation based on a common vision. We needed to think about the KPIs and metrics. We needed to define basic terminology just so we could sort of move forward on a common ground. It also helped in setting up operational structures and how we could sort of learn from that. And not least, because we are a pan-Nordic operation with 5 countries participating, it was a question of how can we be place-based and still be Nordic? Because every area is, what are the big questions? How can we maybe divide them into smaller questions and still feel that we're getting common tools that we can work from? And I just took this quote from McCanhill and et al. In 2020, because that is, it's so difficult if you don't define things. I mean, I'm a person of words, and I just think, as you can hear, so I just think that's so important. So that's what we did. And first we went and we did a literary review. And these are the word clouds that sort of came out of that. I'm not saying that it wasn't a 2-year literary review project. It was fairly quick, desktop. And you could see that there was conscience, place-based, thriving, a lot of sort of subjective words, if you will. All very important, and all the words that I would like to see come into tourism. But when we took the workshop, you could see that there was a lot of things that were much more down to earth. Guest-tourist ratio, energy conversion, net positive, education, measuring, giving back, and that there were sort of these things that were so important for them concerning public policies, concerning just what am I supposed to do tomorrow? And that is also something that you need to combine. So after 2 months, this was basically our results. I think it's about 70 words, and I don't think anybody will be impressed if I put that as a deliverable. But anyway, this is the result of 2 months, where we defined Nordic regenerative tourism as invigorating communities and fostering landscapes by ensuring that locals and visitors gain satisfaction from its success. We within this project, contribute to the revitalization, re-energizing, and well-being of our environment, our neighbors, and ourselves. Through principles of regenerative tourism, I'm sorry, I'll try and just cut it short, we are empowered to work with our communities and natural environment in balance with the unique and wonderful characteristics of our home regions. So that was sort of that. And I'll just jump through the 3 principles that we set up. I'll happily share these slides later. So the first principle concerned people, defined within the context of local value and participation and involvement, the co-creation Diane mentioned this morning. So nobody's doing anything in a silo. The second principle referred to the environment, where we wanted balance, because that is something that is necessary, because we often talk about biodiversity as very important, but the thing is that the Nordic regions, I won't say suffer, but they are characterized by a lack of biodiversity. We have 3 plants just struggling in the sand, in the sleet, at the middle of August, going, I will not give up. So we have not very many species, not a lot of coverage, but really there's stamina there. And so there's also, a creative environment for evolution and for species evolvement, and that's something that we need to be proud of also. So, and diversity, because we want the diversity, but we also need to look into the natural processes of that, because I think that sometimes we just want to control things. And as a lapsed biologist, I think it's really important to look at the processes rather than try to preserve something. Preservation should be a preservation in a context of a process, not of static. So, and the third principle is, of course, businesses, because we do have businesses and people need to make a living. And within that, we wanted to look at it as a holistic endeavor, where the region within the, under the flag of competition, of course, needs to first and foremost be aware that everything is involved with everything else. And that's why we need to talk together. And if something is out of flux, then the whole system won't work, not in the long run. And secondly, the revitalizing, because at least in Iceland, the rural areas are struggling. they're struggling. There is a flux towards some of the rural areas by young people because they just want to be cold and miserable somewhere outside, which is wonderful. I love it. However, the revitalization of communities comes also through this holistic approach, because it's not enough to create a job. You have to create some sort of living environment, a flourishing, thriving environment where it's fun to live, where it gives you something. Because nobody just wants to wake up, go to work, and then go home and watch Netflix. Although, sometimes you do that. So anyway, measuring progress. I'll go very quickly over this, because this is something that we're doing right now, because it's not simple. Because we need to figure out how to evaluate this. And we're trying to figure out how we can sort of look into community aspects and how we might be able, instead of using metrics and measurements as the key concepts, evaluation, because it's maybe a bit softer, but it still makes you have to think about how you're doing. And thirdly, we introduced the First Mile initiatives, and they're sort of a product from Milena Nikolova, who we've been working with. And these are sort of the first steps, because sometimes for a small company it's daunting to want to be really sustainable or regenerative or whatever you want to call it. You just look at all the large national ambitions and you just go, oh my, there's like 300 miles to the next charging station, so I still use my diesel truck and I have no idea what to do with the waste. And what do I know about 6% carbon decreasing stuff? So the first steps are so important, just to feel that you've done something, that you made your own progress within your own framework. And that's what we're working with the SMIs on. And secondly, because I'm a lapsed scientist, something I'm tremendously excited about is how do we make citizen science products mainstreamed into some of the tourism products? Because all the trends, all the skiff trends and everything, and all saying, oh, our guests, they really want to be involved and they want to give back and they want to be immersed. Citizen science is a way to do that, actually. And it needs to be meaningful, and it needs to be not so nepotistically or narcissistically focused on tourism itself. It needs to go outside into science. And one of the challenges that if there's any non-lapsed scientists in here, I would say figuring out a way to do citizen science projects within social sciences would be really, really rewarding, because the go-to now is environmental science, because it's easy and it's necessary. So I just think that this is something that we will work on for the next couple of years, just to try to figure out how it can work, because there is a natural affinity between citizen science and tourism. And finally, there's the evaluation. And when you're evaluating, you need to ask critical questions. The challenges that we've seen well, first and foremost, it's the timeline. And I put that second, but it's basically you always need more time. And there's patience, and there's funding, and there's everything. And you need to find a way to work around that or with that. But no less, there is this question of how to activate participants when you're doing something that is out of the box. Because one thing that happens is that and this I can so relate to as a business owner myself, you're so busy in your daily drudgery, and then somebody comes and says, oh, let's do something regenerative, and uses words like flourishing. And then you're asked, so what would you like to do? How would you like to see how would you find fulfillment? And the answer, of course, is we need more public funding for international marketing, or they need to fix the road system. They, not us, they. And what I think is really, really important is to try and figure out how can we change this mindset. So while, of course, not losing focus on the important public aspect, how can we self-empower ourselves to figure out a way to collectively or individually work along the lines that give us fulfillment and then translate into fulfillment of our near community? And then there's this sectoral collaboration. The experts, we call them experts from the south, because Reykjavik is in the south. And everybody hates them, except me, because I'm one. So there you go. So anyway, so there's the experts from the south, there's the locals, and then there's the regional and national organizations. And because it's sort of the mind the gap thinking, that how do we make sure that everybody is speaking on the same level and with mutual respect to everybody's knowledge? How do we change? I just read an article the other day where they were saying, and I've read this for 30 years now, oh, the academics need to come out of their Elfenben Tower and speak to the public about the research that they're doing. But I think that it needs to go further. They need to sit down and say, so what do you want us to research? What are the questions that are burning for you and your community? And we can work with you on structuring that into something that gives you real answers. That is the way that we need to go forward, so that people, well, what is called the general public among academics, you know, which is sort of me and you and you and you. So how do we make the projects co-created from the start and then interpreted by everybody? Because it's basically us researchers, because I used to, you know, research fish. I mean, we just make up the framework. We are not necessarily the experts in interpreting the results at the end of the day, because it's the people that are living it that are important for that. And so these are the preliminary conclusions. There's a lot of potential, and we really are hoping to be able to work on that. We want to establish more stronger, not more stronger, sorry English-speaking people. We want to establish stronger local leadership so that we have these groups and these subgroups that are working within their regions. And we need to figure out these stakeholder issues and the engagement. And that calls for innovative design thinking approaches, which is exactly what I have been studying from Diane in the past few months. And just as a last note, and sorry if I tried to speak really fast, I'm very sorry. We have a Nordic Regenerative Tourism Seminar in Malmö on November the 29th, which will be online too, and I encourage you all if you want to learn more about what we're doing there. Thank you very much.
And we have her nearby now, so we're very excited.
Yes, I want just to change one slide from place. Okay. Okay. Okay, good afternoon. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you a lot. I love creative project. And I really believe on creative tourism and also on the network strength to develop communities and better trading relationships. So I'm from Brazil. My city is Recife in the northeast Brazil. It's known by their technology and creative tourism hub, but also for the popular culture. We are proud to say that we have the biggest carnival in the world. And these are some pictures of this. We are really proud of it. And in Recife, we have also a huge social inequality. And these two communities, Bombo da Metério and Ilha de Deus, are two peripheral communities. We've been working there since 2013, and these were communities with high developed community-based tourism. But they faced some challenges on trading, on achieve markets, on improve their products and have a regularity of selling. So, in 2017, me and two colleagues decided to put together these two communities and do a benchmarking, do a brainstorm to learn with each other which were the problems and try to find solutions about their problems. From this meeting, it raised Recria, that is the Brazilian Creative Tourism Network, and Recria's goal is to strengthen creative tourism initiatives that has social development as its main purpose. And we do this internally, training these initiatives to improve their business skills, and externally advocating for creative tourism, designing public policy, and improving the environment, the creative environment for these initiatives, better trade on these environments. So Recria, here is Brazil. We are 9 states. We have 53 initiatives all over Brazil. These are some of our initiatives. So Recife é Sempre Carnaval, you can experience a street carnival of Recife along the year. We have some workshops, first you do drum workshop, then you do custom workshops, and then you put the clothes on, put the costumes on, and goes to the street as in a real carnival, and people from the community comes and join the carnival, the party, and you feel like in a carnival. It's in Bombo da Metério. This Recife é Sempre Carnaval is placed in Bombo da Metério. The other community, Ilha de Deus, is this island, and the experience is cooking with Negra Linda, cozinhando com Negra Linda, and you fish the marisco is like seafood, yeah. You can fish the seafood, learn how to take it from the shell and how to cook it, and then you eat what you've cooked. This is Recicultura. It's a tour on idyllic sites of the city where you create poetry in inspired places collectively and individually. So this is Recicultura also. And this is one in Brazil. It's not in Recife, but I like to show you that we are not only in Recife. This is Brasília, a photo tour. So, inspired by this environment, in 2018, the civil society asked and provoked the government to design a public policy. The design was like this. Sorry, I didn't translate this slide because my design skills are not that good, and I was afraid that things get out of order. But this on the right side are the strengths, the environment powers. So we had a culture diverse environment. We had strong initiatives of creative tourism, and we had a government opened to create, to settle this public policy. We discussed this with these agents, Recria, that is the Creative Tourism Initiatives representative, the Tourism Secretariat, that is representative for the government, the society, I will show you later, that we invited all the society to participate of this process. These people settled a work group that defined that for generate proper transformation, we would need to have a strong governance to nurture creative environment, and this would be done through creative tourism. To achieve this, we thought, oh, we should do the creative tourism public policy, the creative tourism plan. The plan was the platform we developed to achieve this transformational nucleus. So, we did the plan. To do the plan, we had those resources: cultural, financial, social, and environmental. Cultural resources came from society that donated their skills, ideas, intellectual capital. The financial resource came from government, and this resource was used to print the plan, to design but tangible plan, and to hire consultants to systematize all the things that emerged from the process. The social was the main resource we had because we had trust, we had engagement, commitment. People donated all their time and engagement to do this process, and even the environmental resource came because people, the society, trusted the group work, because the group work was legitimated by society. So even to achieve environmental resources, we needed the social resources. So as a result of the plan, we have the So as a result of the plan, we have the sensitization of the population in such a way that new products were developed in an autonomous way, bringing visibility to peripheral territories, which boosted actions for the arrival of services in this period, previously neglected spaces. Also, the integration of productive chain of tourism by visibility and recognition. So we achieve to work together with traditional tourism industry, because before they didn't recognize creative tourism as a proper tourism activity. We also had a very important achievement that was to settle the governance of creative tourism, that is the Creative Tourism Forum. It is independent from the government, so even if the government changes, the forum is still existing and is still with power. The forum has shown itself to be a strong instance with power for social mobilization. It organized public hearings, articulated resources with City Council, and oriented the executive about the use of resources and the execution of important actions for the sector. Here are some pictures of the process. So we, to develop the plan, we first developed the work group, defined the actions. When we had this planned, we did an open conference and invited all the society to participate of this conference, everybody. It was not only for tourism, everybody was invited. They participate on these. Then we make co-creation workshops, also open to all the society. And at each time, the work group systematized the information, organized it, go again to the society, hear the feedbacks, and always this process of feedback. Then, at the end, we write down the plan and ask the society, is this okay, is it? And we launched the plan in December 2018. Also, the Creative Tourism Forum was settled when the plan was launched. So, the plan was to be from 2018 to 2021. And 2020, we had, 2020, we had elections. So the forum asked to tell with all the candidates for the city council, and we established a commitment with each candidate for them to continue the public policy. This is us with the mayor elected, doing this commitment. So in 2021, we built the second edition of the Creative Tourism Plan. It was also a co-creation process, but we saw some go forward. Advance, yes, in the public policy. So the first plan was focused on structure, creative tourism environment. This second creative tourism plan is focused on commercialization. And we launched with the mayor there supporting, and also we have this year 200,000 reais of budget for develop creative tourism initiatives and things, and we also are in many governance institutions. So we are in the board of Socio-Economic Development Board of the city. We are in the strategic plan of the city, not on tourism, but there is one part for creative tourism. We are in the Economic Development Agency of the state. We are in the Tourism City Council, and there is another one I can't remember now. But we are in many governance institutions. So this process of developing the public policy or developing creative tourism is ascending a spiral that we have all the inputs through using governance process here that results in some aspects such as trust, legitimacy, sharing of knowledge, and the results of this process is a more vibrant ecosystem with more linkages, more strength linkages done. And these results serves as these results feeds the other inputs. So it's like this. We are here with some inputs, then, 5 minutes, please? I will go 5 minutes. So we have the inputs, all the process, and the results are, again, inputs for the next level. So the process is in ascending a spiral. So the challenges are, I think everybody who works with groups, with community has some similar challenges, that is finding a common goal that keep people together, deal with the difference of governance, the government time, and people, civil society willings and times, concert aligns all the interests. But what I want really to share with you is, during all my research, I was thinking, why we are doing creative tourism public policy instead of culture or creative economy policy? And I found that creative tourism gives us a lens to look things in an abundant way. We always look to what we have that we can use to attract people, what we have, in order that in other areas, when I participate of groups of culture or creative economy, they are always talking about what is missing. This is missing. They are complaining about what is missing instead of look what they already have, what the resources are in the network, and things like this. Other thing is, creative tourism use art as a main to the relation, to settle the relation. The relations are done through art, and art touches something really deep in us and provokes transformations and make us more open to relations and to transformation. In creative tourism, the learning is not only an outcome, it is also a process. And as we are accustomed to this process of learning, it's easier to innovate, to say yes to different solutions and things like this. So, also, public policy for us is, as we have learning as a process, the public policy is not a goal to achieve, is also a process. We know that we have the public policy, but it's not the end. We need to keep working, we need to keep doing in order to keep this growing and transforming. So we can talk more later. Thank you a lot.
It's now 4:43. We had a break that started at 4:30, so if you desperately need coffee, you can run out. But maybe the best thing at this point, the next session is going to start on the hour, I think. So maybe if you take questions find the speakers at the break. Is that okay? Unless we have any or is there one or two really burning? Everyone wants coffee more than anything else. Okay, we're going to break for the coffee break, but you know who the speakers are. You can find them now and over the next few days with questions, and you can let me know what the most burning questions were. But thank you, all four of you, and apologies for this squish session, but it's been very exciting.
Current sessions, 8.4. It is a great pleasure for me to be chairing it. And so I am going to introduce you the first speakers. Maria Assunção Gato. She is a member of a team who prepared this presentation together with Elizabeth Tomás, Ana Rita Cruz, Margarida Pestrel, and Pedro Costa. They come from Isqueté, Instituto Universitário de Lisboa, and they are going to present a paper entitled The Creator Project as a Learning Laboratory, Reflections of a Research Team. Maria Assunção Gato is a researcher at DIN Miachet Isqueté and holds a PhD in Cultural and Social Anthropology. Elizabeth Tomás is a researcher at DIN Miachet Isqueté. I don't know if I'm saying this right. Okay. And holds a PhD in sociology. Ana Rita Cruz is a researcher at the same yes, Isqueté, is a sociologist and holds a PhD in tourism studies. Margarida Pestrel is assistant professor at Isqueté and researcher at DIN Miacet Isqueté and holds a PhD in sociology, specializing in theories and methods of sociology. Finally, Pedro Costa is associate professor at Isqueté, researcher also at DIN Miacet Isqueté, and holds a PhD in urban and regional planning. So I'm giving the floor to Maria Assunção Gato to speak to us about the Creator Project as a learning laboratory.
Okay, thank you, Leonor. And good afternoon to you all. It's a pleasure to be here in this marvelous island. Thank you for resisting. This is a very long journey, and it is a pleasure to be here with you. I will speak about the Creator project that we developed in the Portugal mainland. That is the original project that inspired the Criatura Açores, as you know. And I'm here on behalf of my team. We are all researchers in Dinamia 7 ISCTE. It's a research unit placed in Lisbon, in the University Institute of Lisbon. And as you may know, the Criatura project was developed in small places, in rural areas and small cities. And Lisbon is not a small place. So we, as a research team, we were not directly engaged in the pilot projects. And we have the privilege to follow all the pilot projects that were developed in the mainland. So we were the research team responsible for monitoring the 40 pilot projects and to make the follow-up of their development, the development of their initiatives. So the Criatura project was developed in the 4 regions of Portugal, North, Central, Alentejo, and Algarve. We had 10 initiatives in the 4 regions, 20 initiatives in the first year, 20 initiatives in the second year, and in the end of the second year, we had 40 pilot initiatives running in the mainland. These 40 pilot initiatives were divided or were run for different kind of entities. We had 9 municipalities, on 11 small firms or individual professionals, 16 cultural or local development associations, and 4 partnerships. And we had also involved in this research project 5 research centers. Dinamia 7 was one of them. So I'm here to speak about our research team experience involved in this project. But I can tell you that before Criatura, in Portugal, we didn't hear anything about creative tourism. We had a low presence in national public policy, no presence in strategic documents, not a relevant presence in strategic documents related with tourism. We had a low engagement of the activities produced with the concept. We had experienced more focus in the activities of bigger scale events like festivals. We had a few and not frequent small-scale activities, but very hard to trace. And we had some good examples as Lolé Creative Initiative, that in fact it was the only one initiative that we can say that it had a creative base in terms of tourism, and it was the most solid initiative that we knew in the Portugal mainland. So Criatura was in fact a true laboratory of methodological experiences and joint learnings for our team. and it was also a path for co-production and knowledge sharing. So we, as I told you, we as a research team, we helped to build several initiatives in terms of methodologies, and we were involved in all of these processes. We helped to launch the 2 national calls for creative tourism projects. We were involved also in the selection of the pilot initiatives. We were working together with the 4 regional teams to support and monitor the project pilots. We were involved in the 3 national idea labs, in 1 inter-regional idea lab, in 30 regional idea labs. We developed the social network analysis. We were involved and developed the actor strategic analysis. And finally, we were involved in the assessment of expectations. And I must say that we did this kind of assessment of the expectations when, in reality, we want to do the assessment of impacts. But it's difficult to assess the impacts in the territory of these initiatives when we have only 3 years and a half in this case for Creatur, but the first year was basically to choose the first 20 projects and to start the initiatives, the activities. So it is these kind of projects have this. I'm anticipating some results, but these kind of projects, in our opinion, have this handicap, this problem, because they don't give us, as researchers, the time that we need to make these kind of assessments. And I think that this is a major problem. So in terms of multidimensional scaling model, I will only show you some highlights from this work that we did. In terms of multidimensional scaling model, what came to what stood out, it was the economic valuation and the boosting the region. So this was the main objectives, the main aims of the 40 pilot projects, what they want to put in the territory, what were the added value that they want to reach with their projects. It was also the revitalization, the transmission of local traditional knowledge, the increase community self-esteem, for instance, and also the territorial attractiveness, the promotion of regional potentialities, and the territorial identity and the territorial cohesion. So I already said that in terms of typologies, we had 3 main typologies: the municipalities, the non-profit associations or local associations, and small enterprises, small companies. But they all coincide with these main goals for the territory and for their projects. In terms of social network analysis, we followed all the development of these in the first year, 2017, they were only 20 pilot projects. In the 2018, there are already 40, and we follow all these density of networks and relations, and well, it is complex to explain all this, but in brief lines, I can tell you that the number of actors increased over time, but the number of its connections increased slightly, which resulted in a low-dense network along the 2 years of projects. The expected connections did not become effective. Limited inter-regional relations between pilot projects. Intra-regional interactions register different relational dynamics in each region, but overall, the low frequency of interaction between the promoters of pilot projects is noticeable. Higher centrality in national actors, like Turismo de Portugal, like Criatur project itself, like the Turismo Centro, Turismo Alentejo, Turismo Algarve. Some pilot projects promoters benefit from a higher centrality because of the intention of other actors to cooperate with them in the future. And these promoters, these pilot project promoters were in fact the most developed, and the promoters that were already operating in the terrain. They were more solid, and for that reason they attract more connections also. In terms of strengths and weakness of this Criatur network, we can highlight the relevance of increasing partnerships between different actors and sectors for the strengthening of their activities. The strengthening of the network potential, not only in the sharing of information and the resources, but also in the development of complementary creative tourism offers or joint communicational, commercial, and training strategies. Difficulty for promoters to create new collaborative relationships or deepen existing ones, especially outside the context of territorial proximity. The investment required from promoters to build collaborations, which is often made difficult by the territorial scale, calendar, and regularity of the initiatives. And in fact, we were working with big regions, and the dispersion of promoters by a region like the Central region was a kind of a problem and a kind of weakness to make network between the different pilot projects, for instance. The need to develop new means of action through partnerships to make up for the scarcity of material and human resources. The increased challenge of overcoming geographical distance for regular partnerships between promoters and creative tourism experiences. The institutional constraints of some types of promoters regarding a greater involvement in the network, despite being able to assume distinct roles and connections within their partnerships. So, in terms of assessment of expectations, and doing that regarding that three typologies, the three main typologies that we identified. For municipalities and other public entities, the economic dimension was prioritized. The goal was to generate benefits for the territory and local communities. promoting and strengthening partnerships that can amplify the positive effects. The intervention strategies focus mainly on endogenous resources and on boosting the local economy and culture through the valorization of tangible and intangible heritage assets. But they were also concerned with reputational mechanisms aimed at tourism. For non-profit associations, they were more mobilized around territorial and local development commitments, since they are non-profit associations mainly concerned with local development and territorial development. And they were concerned with innovative opportunities to articulate cultural and tourism. Their great institutional flexibility, access to partnerships, and good knowledge of the territories position themselves to achieve more advantageous results in terms of creative tourism in low-density territories. However, their subsistence often implies dispersion among multiple interventions, and sometimes this means that they don't dedicate, they don't focus enough in the pilot projects that they launch. For companies, small companies focus in tourism activities. The focus was mainly in economic dimensions, since they have to survive, which implies establishing partnerships, networks in the territory, as well as empowering and enhancing these partners to respond adequately to new business opportunities. As such, some companies are moving more dynamically towards more partnerships, which puts them in a better position to strengthen the future national creative tourism network. And as I said earlier, the failure to properly assess the territorial impacts of creative tourism initiatives was a handicap for us, like as a research team, because we wanted to do that, but the low frequency of such initiatives during the 3 years and a half of the project didn't allow us to do that properly. So we also did a Creature SWOT, and these are only the main highlights that resulted from that analysis. So in terms of strengths, we observed that the experiences based on the endogenous and differentiation resources of the territories to build a tourism offer able to meet the growing demand for challenging and immersive experiences. The great flexibility making it possible to create a customized offer for small groups with different profiles, and the capacity to articulate different experiences in the same product. In terms of opportunities, creative tourism and the Creature allow the creation of new businesses and products in the tourism sector and complementary sectors, the articulation between different local actors. It is a good solution to mitigate seasonality, and it is also a good opportunity to valorization, preservation, and promotion of local heritage and its agents. In terms of weaknesses, we can stress some implementation processes are still not very mature. In fact, in terms of the 40 pilot projects, we observed different degrees of maturity that interfere with the results, the final results in the terrain, of course. It is a niche product, and this means some difficulties in terms of economic sustainability. There's a strong dependence on private transport for mobility, because we are talking about small places. We don't have public transportation in that places, and this dependence of private transport is sometimes doesn't work, or it is an handicap for promotion and for scaling these projects. Difficulties in the promotion and dissemination of the activities. This is also a weakness that we observed in several pilot projects, because they were, some of them were very used to, and they all were already in the networks, in the promotional networks, but some of them were not, and this was also a weakness for some pilot projects. In terms of threats, the municipal electoral cycles and policies can jeopardize the continuity of the strategies in some pilot projects, mainly that pilot projects that are running from municipalities. Difficulties in the maintenance and mobilization of human resources, and the transversal aging of the resident population in low-density territories, and the disappearance of artists, artisans, and trainers with very specific competencies is also a threat. Final note, the Creature project was a unique project for us. We learn a lot, and mainly we stress the co-learning, all the process of co-learning and co-producing that we developed along the 3 years and a half with the 40 pilot projects. And it is a real laboratory for knowledge, for research, for doing, for practicing, for experiencing in the terrain. And I think the Creature was unique for that. And the high visibility of Creature at national level increased the buzz around creative tourism also. In media, in research, in tourism sector, increased the interest of the public decision makers around creative tourism, with indirect influence in future public strategies and policies, promoted the scientific activities around creative tourism, not only conferences, but all the learning that we developed, the international dissemination and the awards. Nancy received several awards. And the promotion of creative tourism activities, workshops for tourists. In fact, we did a lot. The 40 pilot projects did a lot. But when they were starting to run their businesses, the pandemic came, and the pandemic destroyed a lot also. So in this post-pandemic time, we are observing difficult recovery for pilot initiatives. Very few are still in the terrain. Some of the pilot projects mainly small companies had to find another activities, another complementary activities to do to sustain their families. Increased difficulties of economic sustainability in a scenario of crisis and uncertainty as we are living is not good for these activities also. And for this recovery in post-pandemic times, we will need a strong national network to restore the Creature network in the Portugal mainland. And as I observed here in Açores, probably we migrate the Creature project from the mainland to Açores, but probably now we have to learn with the Açores experience to reactivate the Creature network in mainland, because the Açores is vibrant. Creature Açores is vibrant, and we need some of that vibrancy in mainland now. And I hope that the observatory that we are starting now can leverage this recovery in the Creature network, because it's a capital, intellectual capital, a cultural capital, economic capital that we can't lose. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Assunção, for this overview of creative tourism in Portugal and also of the Creature project. You have definitely left us with much to think about and highlighted aspects that will be focused on the debate later on. Now it is my pleasure to introduce you to the next speaker. She is also a member of a multidisciplinary team. This time she comes from the north of Portugal. Olga Matos is an adjunct professor at Polytechnic Institute of Viana do Castelo and an integrated member of Lab 2 PT from the University of Minho. She is a member of a team, as I said before, and this team is also comprised of Paula Romualdo, who is a full professor at the Department of Geography, also at University of Minho. Daniela Angelina is a senior research advisor with a primary interest in cultural tourism. She teaches at different Croatian and foreign universities, is the author or editor of relevant books and research articles, and served as the Council of Europe expert for cultural tourism. Vitor Ribeiro is a professor at University of Minho and at Paula Fracinetti's School of Education. Juliana Araújo Alves is a junior researcher, also at the same research center, Lab 2 PT from the University of Minho. And Olga Matos is going to talk about constructing sustainable tourism strategies in rural territories, the role of creative tourism in Southern Europe. You have the floor.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. In fact, I'm in the big dilemma because at this time, my research is presented in other room, and I asked my colleague Alexandra, thank you for making this presentation. So I'm here to present this work with all this subject, but in fact, this subject is something very close to Paula Romualdo and to Daniela Jelensky that is here, and I hope she can help me to clarify some questions, because I'm not really in the deep uncomfortable situation for the presentations, okay? So I'm going to start. This is something about constructing sustainable tourism strategies, the role of creative tourism in Southern Europe. So as I said, this is part of a deeper investigation with Paula Romuald, that is the leader of our team, Lab 2PT. And because Paula cannot come, she asked me to present this, so I'm sorry already for if I cannot be so clear, but Danielle is here and I think she can help me. So, my presentation is something about very simple aims, theoretical framework, methods, some words about some creative activities, and some final remarks. So, presenting, speaking about creativity and speaking about creative tourism, we need to link these two words, culture and creativity. And the two words are, in fact, a good symbiosis to explore the excellent opportunity for regeneration of small cities and rural areas. That is, in fact, our focus. And also, creativity is the middle of creative tourism, and we cannot forget that in these particular areas could be in the certain way a solution also for some depopulation of many places. So, the aims of this present paper start to highlight the main opportunities for less urbanized areas. Secondly, to characterize the different roles of rural and urban areas in the development of creative activities. And finally, we try to analyze some examples, good examples, of a more sustainable way of making less urbanized territories more attractive to creative tourism. So, we start with 5 questions, 5 research questions, and we're trying to answer a part of them. So, first one, are in fact rural territories playing a different role in creative tourism? So, are small cities and rural areas able to develop creative activities as the same way as the urban? Can the model of urban areas be applied to rural areas? Are there some good examples in Southern Europe? And finally, what is missing to place small cities and rural areas on a tourist map? So, some key ideas. The concept of creativity is difficult, also is difficult to define, is difficult to delimitate, but also we know that is a fantastic ingredient for growth and for helping the development of areas. And in fact, we are looking to particularly intangible heritage, and we think the focus on the local research with all the creativity that is coming from the communities could be a good support for creative tourism. In fact, those things could reveal the higher potential of these less urbanized territories, and in fact, also intangible heritage can be more sustainable, in fact, because it not depend on relevant physical structures. So, rural areas, as we know, in particular in Portugal, we have using some of their resources to make a more intelligent approach with the sense of the community, with the support of several stakeholders, partnerships, the support from local councils, in the way that we think that fits the existing resource and the reality of those places. In fact, we know Southern Europe is very vast territory, very rich, speaking about natural and cultural values, very strong, speaking about cultural identity, and that attracts, as we know, a lot of curiosity from European tourists and also from other continents. So, at the end, we can say that creative tourism can contribute to a more sustainable tourism with a small ecological footprint due to the mass market saturation which occurs in various areas in this South Europe. So, for all these ideas, we start some methods to bring some results to this research. So, these methods are divided in 4 phases. The first one starts from March to October 2017 and was an internet-based research and reached institutions involving CT and created a database. The second, from September to December at the same year, analysis of institutions' website information. The third phase, from July 2007 to January 2011, some interviews with 24 managers of the institutions and the following analysis. And finally, from March to May, the contact analysis of the offer of 4 institutions, and these 4 institutions that we are presenting are, of course, institutions in rural areas. So, as you can see, this is a kind of review of creative activities in the world. Particularly, we have Europe with an important place, Portugal, Spain, and all the Mediterranean base. But we know that there are lots of experience starting in America, Africa, and Asia. And in fact, this can bring to us some ideas and some kind of background. So, for particularly these creative activities, we start to check some criteria, some numbers, and you can see for resulting from this research, we check things like at these institutions, things like the number of institutions, the number of activities, locations, institutions per country, approach, type of activities, language, prices, frequency, and type of participants. So, we can say that at the geographical expansion of creative tourism, we can say that we look first for Oceania, Africa, and America. After, we have a kind of expansion to Europe, and particularly, we have a kind of mass and domain of Europe, Mediterranean Europe. The case is particularly from Portugal, Spain, and Italy. And the second analysis, the type of activities, we can say that the significant proportion of activities related to arts, 23%, and gastronomy and wines, something about 21%. Going to a kind of development stage, we can signal 3 different phases. The first one with activities oriented to cultural creative tourism before 2000, and with Madagascar Explorer as example, with creativity workshops and creative tourism at New Zealand. The second phase, we can say a kind of consolidation of concepts of creative tourism and dissemination of what we call research theorization. And this from 2000-2010 with the Japan Creative Development Network and Barcelona Creativa. And the third phase, what we call kind of maturity of concepts and basis for increase this value generation. There is a replication in other areas and other products. The example is Ibiza Creativa, Loé Creativa, Cerdeira, Jean Paul Creative Jolie, and the Creative Tourism Network. This is a kind of post-2010. And finally, the supply characteristics. We can look to a very profile with short-term activities, usually less than 1 day, and the orientation to local products in the very significant average, 54.7. And we can say also that the majority of these activities are involved in co-creation. Examples, artist moments, making local dishes, wines, gastronomy, etc. And we look also to a wide range of language that are inside this data. So, looking and moving to the rural areas, the focus for today. I bring you 4 examples. This first one is coming from Italy, Easy Frascati, that the slogan is Frascati Wine Tours and More, when wine was born. In fact, this company received the Creative Tourism Award by the Creative Tourism Network at 2015, and this involving in a lot of experience linked to the wine, linked to the vineyards, linked to the cookery courses, and guided wine tastes, etc. And this is a very good example of a small place managed for local people, managed for family people, and is very close to Rome, but is a very, very, very rural area. The second example is something that is called David Morton's Roman Roadwalks, and is linked with the Roman heritage at Italy, and explore this kind of roadwalks, starting at Rome. Yes, it's a city, but all the walks are inside these areas. As you can see, Frascati, Marino, Castel Gandolfo, Albano, etc. And look for a remark for some people that went. The appreciation is fantastic, good food, magical places, so also is a place with good examples. Finally, and I'm not going to say a lot of things about this third example. I think after Daniela could explain better, because all this information are directly linked to the information that Gabriela gave to the project. That is the World Championship of Olive Picking at Croatia, and it's something fantastic because it starts in 2017, I think, and is all related to olives, olive oils, producers, and all kind of experiences that can bring to a natural product that is normal in these areas of Europe. Finally, another example, very, very interesting, because this project starts in the middle of the pandemic, in fact, 2021, nearby the south of Barcelona. It's called Valauta Experiencias at Spain, and this is a group of artists, particularly women, that start making a lot of experience, like I must look, please, let me look, such as natural heritage, arts, handicraft, literature, cinema, storytelling, and they made a lot of experience and in the short period. So it's a very interesting example to look, and has been made recently in the middle of the pandemic. So these are the 4 examples, and we need to continue with some final conclusion, some final remarks. So, we achieved 2 different models in the approach to creative tourism, of course, and also we can see that there are differences between the institutions that operate in different typologies of territories. This is a fact. Also, it's important to say that Creative Tourism Network proves to be an excellent platform to disseminate creative tourism, and after I can explain more that. We are dealing with some difficulties in the model, implemented by institutions in rural areas, namely the problems, and my colleague start to finish saying things like this, namely the communication, dissemination, and information. That is a problem also. The lack of synergy to guide the tourist, for instance, problems with the public transport network, problems with the possibility for restaurants to be open every day, and all these things are relevant problems in these rural areas. Also, we achieved to the conclusion that institutions with more service incorporate directly in their websites have more possibilities of success, helping tourists organize their trip. And also, these institutions that operate in less urbanized territories need to act more holistically and create more consolidated partnerships for local and regional levels. And it is frequently scheduled the fact that this population, these communities, they look to the heritage and they really not take a good value. They look to heritage and then think in the way very negatively. And in this case, I think creative tourism could be an excellent way to preserve local traditions, but also to empower local communities for social governance, and particularly so they continue to be proud of their heritage. This is the most important. Finally, also, a strong preparation for local communities is needed to give a great value of their heritage, as I said, while in the communities, for this case, leaders and representatives must be part of all the process for tourism planning activity. And finally, universities can provide relevant service to all the institutions, especially the smallest ones. And because we are here and we are academics, I'd like to finish saying that we need to build knowledge exchange rather than knowledge transfer. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Olga. Thank you for your presentation and the examples that you have brought to us, which show how activities related to arts can be implemented in rural areas. Now we have a one-person team, David Ross. David Ross is a lecturer at the School of Business and Economics of the University of the Azores, Portugal. He holds a BA in anthropology from the University of Trás-os-Montes e Alto Douro, Portugal, and a PhD in management from the University of Hull in the United Kingdom. His research interests focus on cultural heritage management, cultural and creative tourism, and digital innovation in heritage tourism. He brings us a paper entitled Balancing Creativity and Preservation, Reflections on a Creative Tourism Dilemma. I give you the floor.
Thank you. Hi. It's been a long day, so I'm going to try to keep this as short as possible. I don't have a big project and big findings to present. I basically bring some questions, some things that, issues that I keep thinking about when I look at creative tourism. I've been following creative tourism for some years now. I've been working on the work of providers in creative tourism and the creativity of tourists. And some questions have recently started building up, and that's basically what I would like to share, and just put those questions out for discussion. So I start with this picture, which I've seen shared several times, and I really like this picture because it really illustrates what creative tourism is all about. It really illustrates that interaction, strong interaction in creative tourism. And it portrays the tourist and how he or she gets a more authentic and meaningful experience. It portrays a provider and the benefits that they get, the more diversification and competitive advantage, and also shows a bit of the destination or community side of creative tourism. So there has been a lot of research on those three topics, on creative tourism from those three perspectives. We've seen lots of authors focusing on the impacts of creative tourism on tourist satisfaction, on the quality of the service provider, on the impacts in maintaining healthy communities, empowering communities. And all this research has really built a solid conceptual foundation for creative tourism over the past 20 years. But what I would like to do is, rather than focus on creative tourism from these three perspectives, I would like to shift the analysis from the heritage object. So we're looking at the cultural heritage object and how it is influenced and the role that it plays in creative tourism. So all this research that has been done has really been important in solidifying, conceptualizing creative tourism, but there has been less attention given to the creative tourism object, the product of a creative tourism experience, and particularly how that object and that heritage is affected by the creativity and the creative experience. So the questions I'm trying to address is, what is the end product of culture-based creative tourism? What does it create from a heritage perspective? To what extent can something created by a tourist in a creative tourism experience be considered heritage? Or how similar is it to authentic heritage? What is the role of the creative tourist, of the creative input of tourists in the preservation of heritage? And how does this tourist input influence heritage in the long term, when we think of creative tourism in the longer term? So to look at these questions, I've looked into the foundations of creative tourism, so creativity, co-creation, and I've tried to link that with heritage management, heritage theory, heritization. And as I said, this is a very preliminary stage of research, so I don't have any data. These are just ideas. I don't have any answers for these. I have questions, and that is pretty much it at this stage. So, but let's look first at the foundations of creative tourism, so co-creation and creativity. Everyone here probably knows these concepts pretty well. Creativity, the ability to produce something novel. In creative tourism, this works as this creative self-expression that tourists are allowed to have in a creative tourism experience, and the creativity that providers input. And the co-creation refers to the active involvement, the participation of tourists and the joint designing and consuming experience between providers and tourists. So when co-creation is applied in a context of a creative tourism experience, the creativity of actors is stimulated, and the performance is built on this creative input of both actors. So, for example, a tourist participating in a pottery workshop may choose to include motifs that are inspired by the local heritage object, but may also include or input some of his personal aesthetics or personal or cultural background. When learning a dance, a tourist may include some personal move or some move related to where they come from. This doesn't apply only to handcrafts or artifacts, but also in ideas. So in a interpretation of heritage sites, the tourist inputs their own views to create new significance, to add a new dimension to the significance of a heritage site. So these are ways of thinking that tourists possess from their prior knowledge, from their prior experience, and that they pass on to the heritage object. So like Mary Gravery Barbas put it, when locally produced heritage object is visited by national or international tourists, this storytelling, the storytelling of this object evolves to embrace alternative values, understandings and feelings that come from the tourist. And she goes forth and presents a model, an example of colonial heritage and how the significance of colonial heritage sites is constantly changing, in part because of this constant reinterpretation or adding value by tourists. So by emphasizing a co-creative approach, creative tourism is acting as a platform for values that are both local values but also external values by means of the tourist to be merged in the making of cultural products, of cultural objects. And as a result of this, there's an alteration, there's a transformation in the significance of the heritage object, which will now accommodate values that came in from tourist hand. So like Richard very eloquently said, creative tourism is not only value creation, but creation of values. There are new values being created at all time. So now moving on to heritage management theory. So we have artifacts, we have rituals, we have cultural monuments. These provide a support, a tangible support to cultural identity. The process, how that happens, is through heritization, so how we transform or how we take daily objects and turn them into something of significance, of cultural significance, as representative of what is and what is not heritage. So heritization is fundamental because it safeguards the objects and the cultural expressions, but most importantly, it safeguards the cultural identity behind it. Now, I don't want to go into this into detail, but so heritage theory, the development of heritage theory has been developed alongside this idea of heritage as something unique, as something finite. So there's always implicit, and many times explicit, the idea of threat, of a constant need to protect heritage from its destruction, from its transformation, to not affect or influence this cultural identity. So heritage management, the practice of heritage management, is dominated by this preservation paradigm, where the main focus or the main reason why we love heritage is because we want to preserve it, not because of what it actually plays in our social understanding, our cultural understanding. So heritage is this kind of heritization, is this kind of playing of power. It's a role of playing of power. So it gives people the right to determine what is not heritage, and this is usually played by heritage authorities. But in creative tourism, there's a concession of this power. So we are inviting tourists to or non-authorized actors, which are the tourists. They're not experts, they're not heritage professionals, they're not educated in a formal way in heritage, and we're inviting them to participate in heritage making. So there's this conflicting idea. On the one hand, you have heritage discourse that is focused on safeguarding heritage and against change, and when that change happens, which it does happen and that's accepted, but the change needs to be legitimized by heritage experts and the gatekeepers of heritage. On the other hand, you have creative tourism, which is creating opportunities for the change and the transformation and the inclusion of new values in the making of heritage. Now, this idea of transformation of heritage due to tourism is not new. That is widely researched, but mostly as an indirect effect, as in tourism creates or changes heritage to make it more appealing. But creative tourism is taking this a step further. It's inviting people to intervene hands-on on this transformation of heritage. So how does that affect current heritage management practices? Can creative tourism complement this process of heritization? Is it compatible, incompatible? How do you balance tourists' creative input with the need to preserve the cultural traits that bestow authenticity to heritage? Can creative tourism serve as a tool to facilitate this sense of cultural resistance, of change and adapting to change in heritage? So when you look at creative tourism as a tool for heritage management, as a channel that can aid and assist heritage managers in the management of heritage, you see how creative tourism has this power to drive change in heritage and act as this more democratic tool. This is aligned with some more recent views on heritage management. So Laura Jane Smith's work on heritage as a process, as a performance of meaning making, Holtorf's idea of cultural resilience, of capacity of communities to adapt and absorb adversity, so accepting change and learning to deal with it, or a more systemic view recently by Fuseki, who talks about heritage as from a systems approach, and heritage as a renewable resource that requires transformative tools. So creative tourism is enabling that safe escape from those constraints of not being able to actually change heritage, but accepting heritage. And creative tourism enables that. So if heritage is viewed as a renewable resource, then creative tourism can be a platform that facilitates the heritage making and this heritage transformation. Of course, like any other tool for heritage management, the tool itself needs to be managed. So is there a limit to creative participation in creative tourism? Is there such a thing as over-co-creation in participative tourism? Will communities accept the development of creative tourism and the tourist participation in their heritage? Should they create boundaries or establish boundaries for tourist participation and tourist input? How will authorities that are responsible for managing heritage react to this? What is their stake and what is their role in this creative tourism development? So if you assume creative tourism as a tool, it requires managing the creative input of tourists that is happening during these experiences. So in some cases, creative tourists may have a stronger role. They may have a greater input in the heritage making. For example, in experiences where providers actively stimulate tourists and allow them to decide and to play a role in what is being created, and their limit or pushing forward their limit of input. This could be useful in places where heritage is in decline and needs some regeneration. I put here the example of the donkeys in northern Portugal, because the donkeys were in extinction, the actual donkeys were in extinction, but most importantly, the cultural uses of the donkey were in extinction, and by creative practices, by creative festivals and events and new uses brought in by external people of the community, the cultural use and the social use of this object or of this element, the donkey, has been regenerated. In other cases, creative tourist self-expression, their input can be put on a secondary role or can be limited. So in experiences where tourists participate, but they follow a script. So they're not really inputting some of their personal values, but they're being participative. So that's a more process-focused approach. It still is able to create an immersive experience where tourists are participating, but they're not really they're not really affecting the end result. The last slide had a picture of a cooking workshop. It's a cooking workshop in the south of Portugal, where creative tourists participate in making food, but they follow a recipe. The chef tells them what to do, what ingredients to put, how much ingredient to put. So there's less creative input by the tourist, even though they are participating and have a meaningful experience. So this could be useful to be applied in cases where heritage is more at risk of extreme commodification. So to finalize, this kind of is building up into looking at the creative input of tourists as the main element to gauge in managing creative tourism experiences. So in creative tourism models, we see a lot the tourist participation, but the participation itself is only, can be inconsequent. It can be just an aspect of the service encounter. When you look at creative input, that is affecting the actual heritage object. And when we look at creative tourism from that perspective of that heritage object, then the tourist's creative input could be more relevant in understanding the effect that creative tourism experiences can have on heritage. So more creative input could be the tourism provider would be the person to be responsible to determine the more or the less creative input allowed by a tourist in a certain activity, and this would be decided in terms of the condition of the heritage that you're working on. So if it's a heritage in danger of extreme commodification, if it's a heritage more oversaturated, something that would be determined by heritage authorities and local communities, then tourism providers would be responsible for decreasing the tourist's creative input. It could still be a participative experience, but it wouldn't have so much creative input. Whereas if in situations where heritage authorities and local communities find that there is a heritage element that is in need of a boost or regeneration, then there could be they could stimulate tourism providers to enhance and improve and augment the tourist creative input in their experiences. So I guess basically what I'm looking at is creative tourism frameworks should have this factor of accountability for what their effects are on heritage, and not only on the tourist experience, not only on the communities, not only for the provider. So I'm looking at this role of creative tourism as kind of a tool for heritage management. Again, this is very early, and my next plan is to collect some data and test this and try to create something a bit more solid. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, David. Now I have to say that the fourth speaker is not present. So this is a little bit of good news because we have more time for debate. I would like to invite the speakers of this session to join me here at the table. I almost occupied all chairs. Yes, please be seated. First of all, I would like to thank you all for respecting the times. It was very good to see very disciplined speakers respecting the 20 minutes. Thank you very much. Besides this, I would also like to thank you for your contributions. There were different approaches, different perspectives, from the most general ones with an overview of creative tourism, then going or moving to very specific situations, activities, and finally ending with questionings, which are also very important. Even if we do not have the answers right now, it is important to question and to feel uncomfortable with some of these questions. So I'm sure that the public here has several commentaries and questionings too. And therefore, I open the debate to all of you. Please feel free to comment, to question. Any questions? No?
May I make a question to David?
I think so.
Okay. Yes. It was, in my point of view, very interesting, your idea, but we need to prepare and to look with lots of attention what kind of heritage we are dealing. One thing is to move on, experience about gastronomy or about handicraft and how to look the way that our old communities could make kind of pottery or something. Another thing maybe is to dealing with, for instance, ancient ruin of archaeological place or a monument, and this kind of, I'm sorry, I'm an archaeologist, and I'm a little concerned about that. It's completely different. In case, for instance, my experience working before at a museum and dealing with restoration and making lots of activities was never be even idea that people that are not very perfectionist about restoration could put hand on a piece of ceramics or thing like this. So I think we need, and I would like to listen your opinion. I think we are dealing with different kind of heritage, and in this case, one thing is what we really want to say about the history, the facts, the interpretation of the realistic interpretation of the things. Another thing is bringing this together with the community, bring this difficult subject to the normal life, and make people thinking about past, about heritage, about the things that are normal for our society and our culture. And I think, yes, it's important, it's needed, but I think we need to be careful and spare different kinds of approach. I don't know, it's also a provocation, sorry. I don't know if you agree or not with me.
I'm not sure I'm not sure if I fully understood the question, but what I can try to be a bit more clarify something. So this idea of creative input can be applied to any type of heritage. Any type of heritage will obviously it has its own needs and specificities, but the idea that we can tap into tourists' creative input as a resource for heritage management can be applied regardless of the type of heritage. I expect so. So in the case of cooking workshops, you are participating, you're not affecting. In the case of archaeology, I've worked with lots of archaeological tourism companies, tour guides, and I found many of them that would do the same approach as the cooking workshop. So they'll invite tourists to participate in the interpretation, to discuss their ideas, to bring their own points of view, even if they're not formally educated, but they're creating a lot of creative discussion and interpretation on the heritage sites. But at the end, after that discussion, they would say that was a very nice moment we had there. It was very participative. It was fun, but science says that this is the correct interpretation. And that is, when you look at the mechanics, it's the same as the cooking workshop. So they're following a recipe, even though they're allowing tourists to participate and play around in the activity. If you were to allow a greater creative input, yeah, it would change heritage, but that is inevitable. And if someone is allowed to make an interpretation that is beyond, that is outside of the official scientific scope, it will change heritage. And I don't know if that's desirable or not. I'm just saying it happens, and it could be a potential resource for managing that heritage, understanding and trying to tap into that input that is brought, those new interpretations, those new significance that are developed around heritage sites.
Okay. Please.
Hi, David. Hello, everyone. It's not a question, it's more a comment from my experience as a tour guide. I don't like the word tourists, but visitors, they are no longer bystanders. They want to be part of the experience. They want to enjoy the experience and not really be there, you know, listening to this boring guide going blah, blah, blah. So yes, they participate more. And in terms of physical heritage, like churches and buildings, I don't think that any transformation, physical transformation, of course, is possible. But the truth is that if you listen to what people have got to tell you, and I try to, they do change you as a guide, because you learn something different. Suddenly you are aware of a different perspective. I can give you a very quick and funny example. I was once with a group of people from the Philippines. Well, American already, but originally from the Philippines. I was telling them about Magellan, or Magellan if you prefer, and how he went off 1519, blah, 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 how powerful of him. And when he reached the Philippines, of course, there was a battle and he was killed. And my now friend from the Philippines told me, and guess who's a hero in the Philippines? And I looked at her and I thought, I am quite sure that it's not Magellan. And I said, Magellan? And she said, no, the guy who killed him, Lapu-Lapu. So that's a different perspective, right? And listening to what people have got to say, or what they do with their hands when they are in a pottery, or when they're painting with a craftspeople and creating new heritage, probably, or new approaches, is, I think, the best way for us, the locals, to understand, improve, and evolve. So, David, I really enjoyed the way you looked at it, because it goes back to my original question. What is heritage? Why is someone more entitled than another one to tell me what heritage is? Thank you.
Thank you. And this also makes me think of something that was here said by Assunção about the difficulties of interaction within several partners and actors. So it is interesting that on a very particular context, creative tourism fosters participation and interaction, but when the context enlarges, it is difficult to maintain this dynamics of participation, of interaction, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, of course. It depends also of the interests of the groups, of the people. Well,
it was one of the challenges, as far as I could understand, that you found in your overview.
Yes, in our overview, we were dealing with different entrepreneurs, different participants with different interests in terms of tourism, in terms of creativity, in terms of actions in the terrain, in the inputs in the territory, and it was nice to see this diversity, but it was also challenging because sometimes we observed that some how I can put this, some pilot projects were not they entered in this tourism perspective, this creative tourism perspective, but they were not in the mood. I don't know if I can say this, but they started this adventure not knowing what will this bring or what this means, and they could discover from themselves, and they could challenge in certain cases. They challenge themselves. They challenge their mindsets to see their territory in a different perspective, to see the opportunities in a different perspective, to see the heritage in a different perspective, and.
You mean the pilots?
Yes,
yeah.
The pilots, because we, as I said, we were dealing with different typologies of pilots. We were dealing with different interests relating with creative tourism and related with the intervention in the territories. Different interests. Some of them were more interested in themselves, in their business, not also in the community. Others were more interested in the heritage, in the give something to the community. So there were different kind of interests and different. At the end, they could mingle the interests, and they could find a path, not a common path, but they could find a lot of connections in terms of interests. Mm-hmm. So it was a challenge. It was a real challenge, but it was very interesting to see how they start and how they ended in terms of the project.
Very well. So we can welcome more questions or comments. One thing that really interests me is the scope of creativity. And I was thinking as David was talking how it relates to identity as well, because identity nowadays is no longer considered a very fixed concept. So we are constantly changing as individuals, and also communities also are constantly changing. We cannot expect communities to be characterized by stable identity traits. Okay, so creative tourism brings influences and therefore may trigger this change. At the same time, creativity also does not have a scope that is limited in time. For example, you may be in an experience in which you are obliged to follow a recipe, or your freedom of movements is controlled and limited. But when you go back home, you may use this experience to enhance more creative ways of cooking or of looking at things. So creativity must not necessarily be triggered at that moment when the experience is taking place. It may be rooted in that moment, but blossom sometime after.
Exactly, and in that particular case, that happened exactly. So I asked that provider, so tourists have no creativity, they're just being participative. And he said, yeah, not during the experience, they're just following the chef's indications, but they take the recipe back home and then they send us pictures of, they buy, in that case it was a cataplana, so they buy it and they take it back home and then they start with experiencing and doing their own. So definitely in the moment, in the destination, that particular activity isn't particularly creative, but it does lead to a creative input into that back in the home of the visitor.
Okay. Please, Nancy. Microphone for Nancy. Microphone's here.
I'm not going to say very much because I know everyone's tired. But one of the challenges of creative tourism that we found, and that Tiago and I have conducted additional research looking internationally at literature from artists about the creative process that they undertake. And we compared that to what creative tourism operators can do and the challenges and the, I guess, advice we gave. We could pull out to link the worlds of tourism and creativity. And one of the things I think that we observed was that a lot of the creative tourism activities are from a tourism perspective, developed from a tourism perspective to fill, sorry, I can't see you all, to fill a particular time period. And you can't do a full creative process in 2 hours. And that the examples that we found, and we found some within Create Tour, that are longer in nature, that are a week-long activity, that allow the developers to actually design the creative process to unfold and to deal with the different strategies, were much more effective. But of course that also entails time, which we talked about earlier, and you can't do that in 2 hours. Or you can, it's more of a taster approach to this is how you do this that you've never tried before, but it's not a full creative activity. But that was just something that, yeah, I can pass on the references or something if you're interested, but it was really quite telling. There were a few other things that we came up with and sort of the general creative process that involves setting the stage, creating that sense of a space where you can do something different and learn something different, and then having someone to coach you through a creative process and deal with the frustrations when you think what you're creating is not good enough, and to push you past that into the end. And it was this larger process that the training of creative tourism operators is just beginning. I think we learned a lot in Create Tour as to what is needed, but this is not a side that's usually really explored or a lot mentored with developers so that they keep this in mind as well, because it doesn't come from tourism, it comes from arts, it comes from other areas. That's enough.
Thank you. Terry?
When I first started researching about this, because I had never heard the term here in Portugal, in Portuguese, and coming from an artist perspective, the thing that people sometimes forget is that creative tourism and any type of other activities that you might not even call it creative tourism are not to make people create a full-fledged ballet or compose the greatest aria. It's about taking part of something. If we're coming from the arts sector and we have professional artists or even not professional artists, could be local traditional artists that just do it as a hobby, but they're sharing something with the participants. we are going through a creative process, even if it's just 10 or 15 minutes. I don't like 10 or 15 minutes. I sometimes don't even like it 2 hours. I want to spend all day with me or all weekend, all week. But that today is really hard to happen in the way tourism became. And that already includes here in the Azores. But just the fact that you participate in a creative moment with somebody who is sharing their creativity, that to me is creative tourism.
Yes. We may not all be artists, but we are all creative. Okay, we have a buzz. Buzzes are very important. So thank you for your attention, and I thank also the speakers of this session. It was a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you.
See you soon. Bye-bye.